We're recording. Hi, girls. What's
Hi.
up? Everyone looks fantastic today, as
Thank
usual.
you. Thank you. Look, I just realized my
I
closet
love your
door's
hair,
open.
Billie.
Thank you. I finally cut it. This heat is just like ridiculous.
Yeah. When
Oh,
was the last time you cut your hair? Before this time, you had
well,
your hair was
when
really long.
I had the pixie cut,
Wasn't that during the pandemic?
that was pre-pandemic, because during the pandemic, my wonderful, beautiful hairstylist moved to Florida. Unfortunately, they had to close like the salon, so she had to move, and then my hair started to grow, and so many changes happened because of the pandemic.
Can you believe it's been 3 years already?
That's crazy. It's so crazy to think that
3 years.
it happened.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah,
It
I
really
couldn't believe
happened.
it.
It feels like it didn't, but it really did happen.
It did, and my dog is driving me crazy. Sorry, ladies.
You didn't have a dog during the pandemic.
No, I didn't, and I didn't get a dog because of the pandemic. Though Jason wanted one because of the pandemic, being that he became a work at home person, and he was like, I'm gonna be, you guys are gonna go back to school, and I've been working home, and I'm gonna need a dog. And we're like, no. And then it was like during pandemic, it was like, oh, we should get a dog because we're all home. And I'm like, Seb, what's gonna happen
Right.
once we all go back to normal?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say 2 years after the pandemic we got him, and he's great, but right now he's being a little spoiled. I tend to keep him up here because he won't bark as much.
So, to our listeners out there, today is anything, everything, and all things 3 years after the pandemic.
Yes.
Can't believe it's been 3 years for sure.
It feels like a lifetime, but it feels like yesterday. It's like a
I
combination.
remember being at work and they said it's a pandemic, and I was like, pandemic? No, that's not right.
I remember feeling like this is New York. We're never shutting
Right.
down. Nothing's ever going to stop us. It's not going to hit us this hard. And then all of a sudden, like, bam, the world kind of stopped. Not kind of, the world stopped.
Yeah.
I had those same feelings. Like, you're from New York. You think we would be more prepared. And, I just never thought it's coming to New York. You heard about it in the news in other countries. And I was just like, we're fine. And then no one here took it seriously, I think, which is kind of a New York thing. Or maybe a USA, that sounds so weird. But maybe our country doesn't take things seriously in that sense.
Well, we do live, you girls live in the city that never sleeps. So
yes,
it's like, okay, that's not going to I mean, I work in the city, and I remember hearing, oh, it's a pandemic. And I did feel like I remember the last day with my students. I was at work and very few kids were coming in. And I was like, oh, this is real. And I looked at my kids and I told my assistant, this is the last time we're going to be with these kids together. I have a feeling I'm not going to see these kids again in person for a while now.
Oh,
and it happened. The next day we had to pick up, and Zoom life, right? Remote began for a lot of us.
What's interesting is the pandemic is like 9/11 for us New Yorkers. Everyone knows when you were shut down. Like that memory of where were you, when were you, when the pandemic really happened, though it was happening around the world. But like when it actually, like, where were you? What was your last day at work, or what was your last day at school, or something like that? That's really where it was very similar to like, where were you at 9/11? And you know exactly where it was.
Yeah.
So for me, I was working at a school at the time, and I had a difficult case, and I kept like, I'm big on prayer, the power of prayer. And I kept praying to God, like, just let this kid throw me down the stairs. Like, because I really was like, I don't want to lose my job, but like, oh my God, just let him push me down the stairs, And then the pandemic hit. And then I think that was in March. So March, April, May, June, it was 4 months of remote learning. So I was still working with him in essence, but I didn't have to go to the school and just be in his presence. And I was like, God, I really didn't want to work with him, but I didn't want you to like
caused the pandemic to happen, you know. But I always say it's my fault. But, I mean, obviously it's not, right? But I'm like, I really prayed for a change in like my work schedule or setting, and I think it worked for some students. Some students excelled, and for
Mhm.
others, it just didn't. You know, and it was sad to see that some students, you know, unfortunately, they were in homes where maybe they didn't have the support that they needed. You know, and you're over like on the other side of the computer. There's so much that you can do. And I think Nathy can
Yeah.
attest to this because Nathy was dealing with little ones, and you don't just deal with the little ones; you deal with their
Mhm.
parents, their guardians.
Right.
It was
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. It was very difficult to do a remote work in like in a school setting. At least for me, I don't know.
I mean, I had the 4-year-olds at that time. I was teaching pre-K. They're only allowed 30 minutes of screen time with us live. So it was just 30 minutes of trying to get as much out there for the kids. And obviously the parents would do the majority of the work. Although, like Billie said, it was successful for some kids. It was also on
Mm-hmm.
our side. It was for some of us, we liked it and some of us didn't.
Yeah.
I personally enjoyed it. I think that was my favorite part, working from home. I really liked it.
Yeah.
How about you, Betsy? I know everybody was home,
For
right? You were
me,
also
it
home.
was very, I honestly, I went into it thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to get like a vacation. Like this is going
Hmm.
to be very different. And we'll be back in 3 weeks. You know,
Yeah.
my job, I host conferences for optometrists, and we literally held a conference on March 12th and 13th. And we were like, is this going to happen a couple days before? And then we decided to like give everybody the option to go remote, and they would get some type of compensation, as well as those who chose, you know, fine, like we'll take precautions, like food was packaged individually. And we did that in a turn of like 3 days. We were able to turn around all these things in 3 days. And then when that was Friday, I came into work Monday. Monday, we were like, no, everybody needs to go home right now. My kids were actually sent home Wednesday. They were told that they were going to come back Friday and never went back to school. So for me, the pandemic, what I thought was going to be temporary and I'd get to do a lot of stuff because I wouldn't have to commute, I'd have to work from home, it actually became the craziest time of my life because I had to work on a regular basis. So I work for healthcare, and so I work for healthcare in optometry, and then we also my job is to put on programs, educational programs for optometrists. And so we felt that being that we were in that realm of healthcare, we needed to put on these series of lectures that would discuss and kind of bring knowledge as to how's COVID affecting people, how is it affecting your patients, what can you do, what can you not do, how can you treat your patients, what you need to know about COVID, and what do you need to know for your family. So my job went from 0 to 300 very quick. In addition to being a mother of 2 high schoolers and a middle schooler, trying to make sure that they're scheduled and they're staying on top of their stuff, and managing a home. So it was very chaotic for me. I didn't get the break I thought I was going to get. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to learn how to speak different languages. I'm going to be able to do my job. My job was like, COVID was a curse and a blessing all at the same time. It drove me insane and it brought me to sanity, in my opinion.
You know, I
Is
think
that the
What?
hardest part to adapt, or?
Um, yeah, that was extremely, for me, it was difficult. Listen, I'm very blessed. We live in a house. There's many people who were in a small bedroom apartment,
Hmm.
a small 1 bedroom, who knows
Hmm.
how size of an apartment, stuck in a building, you can't go anywhere. So I have to say, I admit, I had the luxury of a backyard, of a front yard. I have the luxury of everyone has their own bedrooms. So we weren't together, but we were together. It was one of that, well, now I got to make lunch. Now I need to make breakfast, or I need to make sure they're up to doing their homework or attending their classes. Because in the beginning, I was very strict as far as like, we're going to be back in school in 3 weeks. We're going to be there. So I'm not going to break the routine. We're going to wake up as if you're going to school. Maybe like a little 45 minutes later, because I don't have to commute. but we're going to wake up, have breakfast as a family, and then everybody goes off into their own. And then I want to say like 2-3 months in, I was like, you just roll over and do your stuff. But I had to make sure that they were awake and actually doing their things. So we were always together, and I know I had a lot of anxiety of illnesses coming into our home and the potential of someone passing away or getting very sick, not being able to be around my kids if I got sick or they got sick, not being able to help my mom. My mom works in healthcare, not being able to, like, you know, I have so many friends who have healthcare or work with front end people. So for me, it was very chaotic, very stressful. I feel like I went slowly into a depression. I needed to get out of my house, and I would go for these long walks, but I'd be afraid to go for a long walk in the beginning. It took me probably like 6 months to start feeling comfortable to walk outside, even with a mask, because I was afraid, like, it's in the air, I'm gonna die or something's gonna happen. So yeah, but towards the end of it, it became very I started to manage with it, and I kind of had a little bit of different perspective. What about you all? How what was the hardest or best part, or how did you adapt while being in the pandemic?
Nathy.
Well, I think it was hard to turn it off, the whole work, because you were remote. So that was, I think that was my challenge. I love my home, and like you said, I am also blessed to live in a house with a huge backyard, with multiple rooms where I could just pop myself on my laptop, and it's just my partner and I and my four-legged kids. So it was, of course, worried that someone would get sick and finding out that they probably have passed. I think that was like obviously the worst part, But other than that, I did take it in stride. I think after the first week, I was like, okay, no, I always end work at 3. And that was the time I would turn off my computer. At 3, I was done. I would not turn it back on. Whatever was done was done. And if not, I picked up the next day. And I was able to like catch up on a lot of shows. I was able to sleep a lot, take a couple of naps during the day, probably worked out. I wasn't afraid to go out, especially in my neighborhood, because it was a residential area. So everyone, it's just filled with homes, and everybody was just in their home. So I was comfortable going out. I did a lot of shopping. I would go out, obviously, for food shopping or Amazon. Anything that was delivered was okay. But I think that was my biggest challenge, was the turning it off, my work, for sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Billie?
So, I mean, I worked at the school. So that was like Monday through Friday, and I was assigned not just my student, but I was assigned other students that just needed the additional assistance. And I actually enjoyed that, because the students who did show up, they were eager to learn. And I remember one student in school, he unfortunately wasn't well cared for. Like, he would come, sometimes his shirts had holes in it or like stains, But when he got on video, like, he always wore a shirt and a tie, and like, he was just very eager to learn. I think, seeing that, and the fact that maybe other students also like responded in a positive way to remote learning, you have to look for the silver lining in things, right?
Right.
I think that helped his personality so much. And I mean, I was just thrilled that I was helping him through this process, But I also worked at the pharmacy. I worked at the pharmacy, so I had to go in person. And it was scary because, I'd get out of work at 9. I worked in Chelsea, and I would take the train by myself. And in the beginning, it was very desolate. But, there was a point where there were just homeless people, and I'm used to, taking the train. I've taken the train all my life, and I still do. And but it's different when there's multiple people. There's homeless people, but they don't come at you. Like, when you're the only person on the train, they're only coming at you. So it was very scary for me. And I've never felt afraid on the train. I've never felt that way, but I was scared, because it was just me and like homeless people. Sometimes there would be other people on the train, but these homeless people were angrier, and they would come at like in your face. So that scared me, but I had to go to work. I wasn't able to, claim unemployment. I had to go, and it worried me because I had to come home to my family, to my loved ones. I didn't want them to get sick, and like I come from a big family, so it's like a blessing and a curse. Like it's great if they're all doing well, but every day it was like, oh God, I hope I don't hear that one of them is sick. I hope that I don't hear that one of them is sick. I have so many family members, so there were a lot, and it was very scary. And like just talking about it, I feel like like I'm having anxiety and in the beginning when we were home, I was watching the news and my chest kept getting tight, and I would talk to my friends and they'd be like, you don't have COVID. It's just the anxiety. So I had to we had to switch the TV off. We had to like change the channel and just start playing games, and just because I was like, I want to be home because that's where we're safe, but I just can't be home. Like the anxiety it was just too much. So I was happy that I was able to go somewhere like the pharmacy, and I was living a life like nothing was happening. I was still waking up, showering, changing my clothing. I was taking the train, going to work, talking to people. There was some kind of normalcy. And for me,
Yeah.
that kept me sane, like that job. So I don't know. I mean, I think we had to adapt to a different life. I think things are kind of back to normal. But what's normal, right?
Yeah. What is that? I think for me, I started to realize what I thought was normal wasn't normal. Um, I couldn't turn off work. Work was 24/7 for me. It was 24/7 actual, like my job, my actual job, and then 24/7 being a parent. And though my kids were a little older, there was still that I need to make sure that they're doing their things for school and keeping track of their assignments and keeping track that they didn't fall out of the habit too much, and that I kept all of our sanities, um, all of our sanity, all of us insane. Let's just keep us sane, and some level of like habit and normalcy. And we're a blended family, so the fact that our kids couldn't see their other parent for some time, I think we waited maybe about 1 to 2 months, and then we started to test to say, is that household safe for them to go to? Because those households had children. And so we have to think about that household. And then if something happens in that household, it affects our household. So we were one household affecting two other homes, and multiple families within those homes. So I had to be very mindful of that. I didn't realize the toll the pandemic took on me until I was starting to feel like something was wrong with me. I was like, I don't feel normal. And I didn't realize how much of a toll my normal life is actually taking on until the pandemic. So it's like the pandemic caused a toll, but I realized that as I was experiencing that, there was a toll that my normal pre-COVID life was giving me that kind of imploded during COVID. And it was through those habits of saying like, oh my God, what I got to do. And I was like, how did I do this before? How was I running to the train and making sure my kids were in school? And how was I able to keep my sanity? I'm losing it now when I'm home and I have all these hours in the day, though I'm working a little more. How did I do it on a regular basis? And that's, to me, one of the things that the pandemic showed me, that normal wasn't normal. It was extremely exhausting for me. Are there any?
I'm sorry, but
No, go ahead.
Are you still dealing with the anxiety? I mean, you say you have anxiety just talking about it, but thinking, I guess, what it is 3 years now after, are we still, how do you feel about it now? Because I mean, I'm all pro work from home. Although I had to go back. I mean, my first year, obviously when the pandemic hit, everyone was home. And then the next year, the following school year, I was still working from home, and I absolutely loved it. And I learned that I was surprised, actually, that I enjoyed working from home. I didn't think I was going to be able to work from home because we're always on the go. We're always moving. traveling, and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, I can work from home. And I was like, I can work from anywhere in the world and still travel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
um, so I really saw that as a positive, and now I still would not mind working from home. Unfortunately, I'm in the age range of children that I cannot teach a 3 year old or 4 year old from a computer, but maybe in the future, I probably would still do some remote work.
Mm.
I think in regards to like my what I'm doing now, I do therapy work. I feel like, dude, like everybody and their mother realize, shit, I have anxiety or I have some kind of mental health, illness. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I think that's
Yep.
wonderful. Not that they have it, but the fact that they're
Yep.
more open to talking about it and to receiving the help, the services. I think pre-pandemic, there was like a stereotype, or stigma. Excuse me, there was like a stigma behind, you're talking to a therapist. What is wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, no, speak up. Like if something is bothering you, if you feel a certain way, like let's talk about it. It's real.
Yeah.
So I love that therapy became more accessible. I have many clients who we do like virtual sessions, over the phone or like through video. And I think maybe it would have happened, but I think because of the pandemic, it happened sooner. And I
Yeah.
think that it's something that, we should all focus on, like our own mental health.
Yeah. So I look at the pandemic as this. And it's a very weird analogy, and I tend to always look at things as analogy in life, right? So my daughter, many years ago, I think she was in second or third grade, no, third or fourth grade. She twisted her foot running to school. I thought it was just a twist. A couple days later, I ended up taking her, and it was a fracture. She was in a boot for, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. And then when she came off the boot, she was walking normal. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, she starts to complain about the same foot. And it turns out that she has flat feet. And the doctor said, well, the pain that she has is due to her flat feet. She's going to need an insole because her foot being rested or stopping its normal. The fact that her feet were always moving, it didn't know that it was overcompensating because it's always been moving since she's been a child, right? He's like, this pain that she's experiencing wasn't going to happen until she was older when she started to slow down. He's like, the fact that she stopped moving for 6 weeks, that foot, and then started using it, the foot was like, oh, wait, we can't move that way no more. My foot is flat. We need to readjust how we walk. Like, you need to give me support. You need to give me an adjustment. You need to change my foot. You need to change my shoe. I think that is the best way I can explain to COVID. COVID brought out things that we were all experiencing, but we couldn't address or didn't even know were there. And some of us knew, but we wouldn't address it. And I think it kind of put a very big light on good and bad situations that we were all dealing with and needed to address. Some of us did, and some of us didn't. For as much as it was crazy for me, I know for me, what it showed me was you are not taking care of you first and foremost. You're extremely overwhelmed. And what are you doing to take care of yourself? And you have severe anxiety. That was kind of what COVID taught me. And then the best thing that it taught me was, hey, you have this red flag happening, all these red flags going. Can we address them? Can you do something? Give me some physical therapy. Give me a cushion. Do this, do that. And I will say that was my highlight of COVID, where I started to realize that my self-care I wasn't taking care of me. I guess that's my highlight of COVID. And I got to spend a lot of time with my kids and my partner, which I was very happy about. I don't know. Anybody has any highlights about COVID, at least? And aside from working from home, which I'm going to just, one last thing I'm going to say is, I enjoyed working from home, but I did miss the people interaction. So if it were me, my happy medium is a hybrid. I come in maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on what's going on, days a week. and then the other days I'd be home. So if it were up to me, I would do a bit of both, because I need that social component. I need to get away from my household. And Nathy, you only have your fur babies, but I have human babies that are not babies.
Yeah.
And sometimes getting away from them and the partner is kind of necessary. Any
But
highlights
don't
for you
tell
all?
them.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
They
yeah.
know.
Well, for me, it was definitely just addressing mental health. That was
Yeah.
definitely a highlight. And also, I have a few siblings, and my older siblings and myself, we had more of a close relationship than with my younger sibling and his partner. And I feel like we lived in the same house. They lived in the basement, and we lived on the first floor. And I still lived in the second floor. And we had no choice. We had no choice but to be together. I mean, not that we didn't have a choice, but it was just like, all right, I'm in my apartment all day. Like, at least if you go upstairs, they would come, to the first floor, and we'd spend time together. We play games, we cook, we have like a space in the backyard. So it felt somewhat normal. And I think, again, for me, it was just finding some normalcy anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was going to my job at Rite Aid, whether it was like still spending time with my family at home, cooking meals and just playing cards like we did in the past. So I think the pandemic brought us together, but closer together, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it definitely, made me appreciate the fact that we weren't able to see some of our family members. Like, my nephew was born pandemic year. He was born in March. I saw him when he came home from the hospital, and then I didn't see him again for 6 months. And I hated missing like those 6 months when he's just like, cute little thing. So when we got to see them again, like my older brother and his family, it was just like, oh my God, like we just take even a hug for granted.
Yeah.
So I think for me, like, it just puts a lot of things into perspective. Things that you were concerned about before, it's just like you really think about, like, wow, I was really concerned about that, and I shouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
been. Like, there are
Mm-hmm.
things that are far more important, that you didn't realize, or at least that I didn't realize, up until the pandemic.
I think what Betsy said was also for me in regards of taking care of yourself, because we forget about ourselves while we're working and our
Mm-hmm.
daily schedules, our family, our kids, etc. I was okay not seeing people. I really was.
Including us.
I'm a
So
homebody. Yeah, I mean I'm a homebody, but I was okay. I didn't really need to see any parents or see
Yeah.
any staff, or just I was happy being home. Of course, I mean, unfortunately, we did lose a family member in our immediate family, and that was hard, of course, and that was devastating. But we, like, I think it was Billie who said we take it for granted, our families, our friends. I mean, I've always been the person that always reaches out to a lot of people just to even say hi, even though they don't reply. Those are the one things that I continue to do. I continue
Mm-hmm.
to call them or maybe text them, and it's okay if you don't reply, but at least, like, I feel like I checked on you and see how
Mm-hmm.
everything is on your end, and that's okay. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with not receiving a message right away, maybe, but
Yeah.
it's important to reach out to your loved ones and your friends. And I mean, I think we all got together as well, like virtually, to play games, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all got together. I would do meetings with family members. I think we did like Mother's Day over Zoom, because it was like right on the heart of the pandemic. Birthdays through Zoom. So I mean, we made it the best we could.
You had
mm-hmm.
to get creative. I know
Yeah.
for me, so I at that time I was part of this committee at work called the recognition committee, which is a committee that recognizes people like service, but we would do like these happy hours at work. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, to kind of keep some level of normalcy, like let's do a happy hour cocktail
Virtual.
virtually on
Yeah.
Thursdays. And it was like Thursdays, Zoom Thursdays. And number one line is you're muted. And it, like
Mm-hmm.
all these people would come in. And over time, it started to die down. But it was a lot of people who truly appreciated just to be able to see, even if it was in a box. It's so funny because it was like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to know people through a box versus like in person. My family and I, since we're, we got to do a lot of Zoom stuff, we got together and started to come up with a lot of games. Like Nerf guns became a big thing in my household. We did this thing called chancla ball, which we didn't have a we didn't have a ping pong paddle, and so my stepson Jaden goes, I'm going to use my cell phone. And I was like, well, that's a really expensive paddle. And so he grabs his chancleta and he's like literally playing 10 ping pong with a freaking chancleta. And we had chancla ball. That's how we came up with it. For Easter, we dressed up and took made a nice dinner, put candlelight. And we tried our best to keep things as optimistic and realistic. I know like there were a lot of goods and bads, and I know that the pandemic for us brought a lot of scary things for us. We towards the end of the pandemic, once I started to go back to work, my daughter got sick with a post COVID syndrome, and that was very scary because it wasn't really talked like they were talking about long COVID. And you hear long COVID like, oh, foggy brain and what's it called, like heart stuff and breathing issues. Nobody really was, or at least I wasn't. I had to turn off the news. I wasn't really hearing in the major things, though I was listening to the news, but not all of it. I wasn't listening about post COVID conditions, and here she comes and develops its issue. And it's very scary to come across this thing that you thought was only COVID or long COVID, and there's all these other things that are not being looked at or addressed. And you have to make sure that you are aware of the news but not chewed into it where it's affecting your mental health, because too much of one thing
Mm-hmm.
is not great. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that I started to like make sure like I'd research things but not go dive deep into it so it wouldn't affect me. But I wanted to make sure that I was aware of anything or any signs or any illnesses that I had to kind of pay attention, because what happened to my daughter was something that came out of nowhere. But COVID for me, actually, what it got me to do was take care of myself. I would say my one highlight of COVID was that I realized my self-worth as far as in my profession. Um, and I realized that I needed to take care of myself, that I was very unhappy with how I was living my day to day, not with my family, but that how I was executing my day. What was I doing for myself? How was I doing it? And it's a reminder that I still practice every single day. Like, are you happy with the decision that you're doing right now? Are you working out? And I'm not saying for looks. I work out for my mental health and for my physical health so that I'm
Mm-hmm.
healthy. Are you eating well for yourself? And I think it's a practice I'm very grateful that came about because of COVID. Would it have come about any other way? I don't know, but I know that was the catalyst of it all.
I ate so well that I gained weight.
I did too, a little too
Happy
much.
weight.
Yeah.
Are you? When was like the last time you girls wore like a mask? Because I wore a mask up until we stopped, and then this school year we were still wearing masks because obviously at least my students, because they're 3, some are 4, they're not vaccinated.
Mm,
So for them, they're much more vulnerable. So I still had to wear a mask. My students still had to wear a mask.
I
I
didn't
think up
even think
until like
about
the
that.
last month of this school year, the children were still wearing masks because some parents are still on the fence. They're not vaccinated. They don't know. I mean, everyone was scared of the unknown. And I think that's still something that's still happening right now.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I think everyone, as the listeners are here, all their feelings are valid because
Yeah.
we all went through the same pandemic, but we all had different views
Experiences.
and experiences and things like that.
And I want to make sure that everyone here knows, our listeners, is your thoughts, and piggyback on what Nathy just said. Your feelings are 100%. If you want to vaccinate, vaccinate. If you don't, you don't. Do not feel pressured to do anything that you haven't thoroughly researched. I'm not talking about like, TikTok. I mean like actual research, conversations with a physician or something like that. Doing your research and feeling that you're comfortable to make that decision. You as a parent and as an individual have the right to choose to go one way or the other. It's your life, and whatever is best for you, you do. I was going to say one more thing and I completely forgot. Oh, the last time I wore a mask was literally the other day. I took my eldest to urgent care because she had signs of strep throat, or she had this rash. So she already had gotten diagnosed with strep, and she kept getting this rash. And we're like, listen, I kept saying to her, I was like, it's not the food you're eating. It's not something you've consumed. I think it's a strep rash. And she's like, no, Mom, I think it's something else. So we went to urgent care. Urgent care now still does that. We had to, so it turned out that it was a strep rash. So just so you know, if you have a rash that's coming on before or after strep, it's that. But still get it checked out. At work, we were wearing masks up until a couple of months ago. If you were in patient areas or the elevator, you had to wear a mask. On my floor, due to the fact that I don't have any patient interaction and it's very separate from each other, we didn't have to. But once you got in the elevator or got anywhere near patients, you needed to. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to get on a plane, do it. And you do what's best for you because you know what's best for you. Billie, any thoughts?
Working at the pharmacy, we still wore the mask up until a few months ago. And we would have to go into the system to check whether they wanted us to wear a mask or not. So, yeah. And I mean, I think pre-pandemic, it was weird to see someone wearing a mask. I did, when I went to Japan, I saw like people wearing a mask, and, in my head, I was like, oh, maybe they're sick, but now like, I'm just like, well, they just want to protect themselves, and we did see, at least with the pharmacy, that kids weren't having, any kind of infections. You didn't see like, flu. The flu was down by a lot, and it's because they were wearing a mask. So there are so many benefits to wearing a mask. And I think when I see someone wearing a mask, I don't feel a certain way about it. And if I want to wear a mask, then I should be able to wear a mask without being judged, I just thought about something that I realized so I wasn't dating anyone during the pandemic, and I was so grateful that I was single because I was able to be with my family, that I was able to be, because Nathy and her partner, like Nathy really didn't see her family. And Betsy, you with your partner, which is like your immediate family now. Like my immediate family are still my parents, and my siblings, or mostly my parents. And I was like, I'm so happy that I'm single, because if not, I would probably be somewhere, in an apartment somewhere with a person, and I can't see my family. So I was so happy that I was single because I was able to spend so much time with my family, so I'm always trying to look for the silver lining in things. And in that moment, I was like, I'm so happy that I'm single because I can be here with my family. I can help my parents out. I'm going out. I'm bringing things for them, so they don't have to go out like it, So that definitely, I just wanted to share that, and I know it was hard for some people being by themselves. Like everyone had their own experience, whether it was good or bad. But I just think, like, I hope that, everyone takes the time to reflect on their experience. And, if you need to make changes, maybe you have to make some changes, who can say that it may not happen again? You
never know.
There's so many unknowns. So
to our listeners, we are, all your feelings are valid. If you have any comments or questions, please reach out to your best friends or us.
We're their best friends too. We're their new best friends.
Yeah, of course.
And I won't charge you for listening.
I know. I feel like this episode could have gone on longer because there's so many branches to the pandemic. I think Billie, you just brought up a great point: relationships in the pandemic and how that affected, whether it's a relationship with family members or how, if you were dating. There was
let us know. Let us know if you were dating.
Yeah. How did
And you're
that
not
go?
dating
How did that
anymore.
go?
Yeah. Pandemic babies. It's a whole nother conversation, you
Yeah.
know? All right,
All right,
guys. Well,
guys.
we
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed this episode brought to you by your 3 new best friends. Well, we're not new best friends anymore. We're your best friends. Unless you're a new listener, we're welcome to always
Welcome.
being your new best friends. So for those of you who've been listening to us, thank you for continuing to come back. For those of you who are just checking us out, please continue to come back. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a like, share us, give us your thoughts on anything, agree or disagreements. We love you no matter what. And until the next episode, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye. Stay safe.